Now, Eustace, you're a veteran, and I'm a veteran. And I know when I went in the service, I was just about as patriotic as anybody could possibly be. That's the way that I felt anyway. And, you know, I saw things in the service, Eustace Mullins, that would lead me to believe that I still love my country, don't get me wrong, but it's this government that I don't think that I'd ever fight for again, because you just kill a lot of people, raise a lot of debt, raise a lot of taxes. I come back, the people are far worse off than they ever were before, and we seem to be enslaving ourselves. Is this true, or am I imagining things?
Oh, you're not imagining anything. In fact, I was in the Air Force during World War II, and I can't say that we were very patriotic, because during our basic training down here at Miami Beach, we were marching along, drilling in the morning, and we were singing to cadence, and we would sing, I hate wall, Eleanor hates wall, my dog Walla hates wall. And all we did was make fun of these phonies in Washington, you see. So I can't say that we were that patriotic. And over in England, whenever Winston Churchill came on, Evelyn Waugh, one of the most famous English novelists, pointed out in his memoirs that whenever Winston Churchill came on the radio while they were sitting around in their officers' club with one of his great speeches, they would sit around, they would laugh themselves to tears at this old drunk, you see. Whether, apparently he didn't inherit the taint, but anyway, he was always a little goofy. And he was really a drunk. If he didn't have his 2 quarts of whiskey a day, he really didn't know where he was. And during the great Blitz of London, most people thought he was, you know, being very brave, staying in London during the Blitzkrieg.
Well, that's where his 2 quarts of whiskey were.
Well, he was 8 stories down. They built him a special shelter, 8 stories down in the ground, a very comfortable room, and he was liberally supplied with whiskey. And in fact, they used to show this room, but a historian named David Irving did a new biography of Winston Churchill. And he was an establishment historian. He was published by Macmillan, which is owned by the Rothschilds. And so he sent this new biography of Churchill to the offices of Macmillan, in which he went in at some length about how this old drunk slept out the war in this special room underneath London. And they said, oh, no, you can't print that. And he said, well, that's the key to my whole biography. And so they said, well, goodbye. And they refused to print the book. And he finally got it out on his own, and he started touring and lecturing on some of his discoveries, with the result that Canada officially banned him from entering Canada. That's a very dangerous person, because he was telling the truth about Winston Churchill. And they have riots when he speaks, you know, and it's all very exciting.
We're talking with Eustace Mullins today, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the book. It's the World Order and it's about our secret rulers. It's extremely, extremely important that we understand what is happening in America today, because we do have a $4 trillion debt. The nation is on its way down. We've become a third world entity. And we used to be the finest, the strongest, the most industrialized, the #1 nation in the world. And our education system also used to be the very best. We're having severe problems, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why Bobby Lee is here today with Eustace Mullins, one of the patriots and the heroes of the truth and the Jeffersonian philosophy of government. So this is the book that I think that you must have in your possession in order to become educated about the world order. The business of America, what really, when we're talking about the business of America, what is the business of America? I thought it was for little businesses to be able to start and to work hard and to progress, and for a small family to be able to build themselves up and become financially successful and with morals and ethics, and everybody work for the common good. Is that the way that business is done in the government today?
No, that's the myth. But we, unfortunately, you and I are talking here today about the reality. We could talk about myths all evening if we wished, but if we're going to talk about reality, then we have to say that this is a soap opera from Hollywood, the American dream. What we are facing today is the American nightmare, a wholly owned colony dictated to by aliens, in which the chance of a young person today of making it is almost nil, unless he happens to be a scion of one of the insider world order dynastic families, as George Bush was. Now, George Bush, of course, his path was smooth. He was a member of the Brotherhood of Death from Yale University. And we were so lucky to have him replaced by Bill Clinton, apparently from Middle America, the heartland of America, a Rockefeller protege, a Rhodes Scholar. There's never been a Rhodes Scholar. They're the Rothschild Scholars, but they didn't want to call themselves Rothschild Scholars, so they named themselves Rhodes Scholars. So we have now in Washington Bill Clinton, a Rothschild Scholar and Rockefeller protege. You know, the Washington Post on June 21st explained the sudden meteoric rise of Bill Clinton when you had all these people contending for the presidential nomination in the Democratic Party, and they all looked equally qualified, they all looked equally stupid, and which would satisfy the American people.
And they were all lawyers.
And they were all lawyers, and they were all proteges and insiders. You had Albert Gore, whose family has lived off of largesse from Arm & Hammer for many years, the founder of the Communist Party of the United States, and this has all been printed in the Washington Post and many other places. So suddenly the Rockefellers said, well, it's time for the show to be over, and so Senator J. Rockefeller and David Rockefeller notified them, Clinton is the man, I want all of you other people to disappear, and so Clinton came forth as #1 Rockefeller choice.
You know, it's amazing. Of course, you know, to me, from changing from George Herbert Walker Bush to Bill Clinton is just like leaving the soiled diaper on the baby and just changing the safety pin.
Well, very good analysis.
But it was money bought and paid for, as you know, and Jackson Stevens loaned Bill Clinton $2 million, and that was back in, I believe, around February or so, and Bill Clinton was really kind of almost getting down towards the bottom of the heap of those 7 individuals that at first had decided to run for President of the United States on the Democratic ticket. And all of a sudden he had this money. He came into Georgia, he had 26 people that he employed as far as being front people. And pretty soon he took Georgia in the South, and he was well on his way. And I think that was pretty close to it. But he was bought and paid for, you're saying. You're saying that Bill Clinton himself was bought and paid for. And are you telling me that we voted for a change and the change isn't going to come to our benefit, Eustace?
Well, that reminds me of a story I heard in my small town in Virginia. And these 2 businessmen were talking, and one of them had a bill that he wanted to be approved in Congress. And he said, I wonder if I couldn't influence Congressman so-and-so in Washington to vote for this bill if I, you know, just bought him. And the other man said, don't be ridiculous. That's the most insulting thing I ever heard of. He said, Congressman so-and-so was bought and paid for long before he ever got to Washington.
and that's an honest congressman. Once he's bought and paid for, you know, he stays bought and paid for.
Absolutely. He goes off the block. He's no longer available.
Right. We're coming to today, and we're coming from George Bush to Bill Clinton. What do you see in the future for America for the next 10 years, Eustace Mullins? This new world order, is it taking shape, or do you think that all of a sudden we're going to come to critical mass and it's all going to disintegrate before our very eyes?
Well, I think we're at critical mass already. Now, we have a very interesting situation, which we saw during the last election. You had the biggest turnout that you ever had, and of course, the trend had been for lower and lower percentages of the American people to come out and vote, because they did everything that they possibly could to discourage the American people from participating in the election. Fewer people voted every year because, you know, they made sure they understood you either vote for Tweedledum or Tweedledee, and it doesn't make any difference which one gets in, because we created them both out of nothing, just like the Federal Reserve creates money out of nothing, and we create these politicians out of nothing. And when you look at them, you can see that they come from nothing. There's no question.
Absolutely nothing.
There's no question about that in anyone's mind. Well, this time, he suddenly had a wild card, and that was a billionaire named Perot. He appeared on the scene, and he was almost elected president by acclamation. People were so disgusted with these phonies, Bush and Clinton, and no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't say anything good about either one of them. And so the people looked, and here's a successful businessman, Perot, spunky, got down to business, he would get on television and rivet the attention of the American audience simply with a few charts, which has always been a no-no in politics. You never show a chart to the people if you want to get votes.
Well, you never tell them how it's really like.
That's right, and you never tell them, look, we're destitute, we've got to start thinking of something, because you see, the Rothschilds and the world order dynastic families, they profit by other people's suffering and despair. They profit when you have a communist revolution go in and murder 10 million peasants. And so, this is exactly what happens. You know, Baron Alphonse de Rothschild was asked during the communist revolution there, he said, aren't you worried about all of your houses and your vast estates and so forth with the revolution going on? He said, certainly not. He said, you always want to buy when blood is running in the streets. That is, when everybody thinks we're collapsing, nothing's going to be worth anything, and they say, I'm going to dump this for a penny on the dollar. That's when the Rothschilds and the insiders buy everything. And, of course, the United States is coming to that point now. We're in a recession. Real estate is down. This is the time to buy, because this is a fluctuating thing. It goes up and it comes down. It goes up and it comes down, because it's manipulated. It's always manipulated. You know, J.P. Morgan was asked once, as the leading banker in the United States, someone rushed up to him and said, Mr. Morgan, please, would you tell me, what is the stock market going to do? He said, sir, it will fluctuate.
I love it. That's a great story. Let's go back to the dynasties, because one time I heard you speaking, Eustace, and you said that there are 3 tiers as far as the dynasty of families is concerned, from the Rothschilds and the New World Order. Could you explain that 3-tier system to me?
Well, nothing can really function unless there's a hierarchy. Somebody at the top has to tell the people lower down what to do and how to think and how to act and so forth. So in the world order, you have a very distinct hierarchy. Dynastic families who can trace their lineage back thousands of years, and because they have learned to survive and how to manipulate other people to do their will. And that's all being a member of the world order means. You know how to use other people and profit by them. And whether you slaughter them or rob them or torture them, whatever you do, you make money at it. And this is what they do. So in the world order, you have a top hierarchy of first-tier rank of dynastic families composed really of the old surviving aristocracies of Europe, the black nobility they're called. They're called the black nobility because they came from the darker strain in the aristocracy of Europe. And the old Viking, blue-eyed, blonde aristocrats, more or less, were pushed into the background, or they intermarried with the black nobility and became contaminated. And this is what you have. Of course, the surviving royal family in Europe today is the royal family of England, and they have been black nobility since the 12th century, when the Este family of Italy married into the British royal family. So the first rank, first tier is the old aristocracies of Europe, plus what they call their Hofjuden, which are the Rothschilds and families of that nature, who are able to raise money for them and keep them functioning. Now, in the second tier of world dynastic families, the world order, you have the families who themselves are enormously rich and powerful, but their duty is to serve as courtiers to the first tier of dynastic families. And people in that category are the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the Morgans, and so forth. Now you have a third tier of dynastic families who serve the second tier. They're never allowed to approach the real top people in the first tier, but they can only serve through serving the second tier. And these are families like the George Herbert Walker Bush family. George Herbert Walker was president of W.A. Harriman Company, and the Bush family's entire career in banking was to serve the Harriman interests, who in turn served the Rothschilds. So that's why I began to use the term about Bush as a dynastic family in the world order of the third tier. And it was picked up, and I see it popping up everywhere. They say, George Bush is a third tier family. They don't even know what they're talking about. They don't explain it because they don't know how to explain it.